E. The moment he suggested we stay at a nearby hotel, I hesitated. My nephew's voice was calm, rational even, as he explained that it was late and unsafe to drive back. I agreed, telling myself it was the most practical choice. Yet, as we walked into the dimly lit lobby, a nervous energy began to settle over me. Something about the situation felt unusual. But I brushed it off, determined to maintain my composure. As the receptionist handed over the keys, my heart raced. We were family, after all. There was nothing inappropriate about two relatives sharing a hotel room for the night, especially given the circumstances. Still, I couldn't ignore the tension that seemed to bubble just beneath the surface. I shook it off, blaming my overactive imagination for conjuring scenarios that had no basis in reality. The room was modest, but it felt intimate in a way I hadn't anticipated. A single queen-sized bed dominated the space, leaving little room for anything else. "I can take the chair," he offered. His voice soft but firm. His chivalry caught me off guard, and I quickly insisted he take the bed instead. "We can share," I said, my tone casual despite the unease swirling inside me. "It's no big deal." As we settled in for the night, the silence between us grew louder. My mind raced, replaying the events of the evening and second-guessing every decision that had led us here. He, on the other hand, seemed entirely at ease, his calm demeanor only adding to my unease. I turned on the TV, desperate to fill the void with noise, but even that did little to quiet my thoughts. "You seem tense," he said, his voice cutting through the static. I glanced over, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "It's been a long day," I replied, forcing a smile. He nodded, his gaze lingering on me for a moment longer than necessary before turning back to his phone. The air between us felt charged, and I couldn't help but wonder if he felt it too. Hours passed, but sleep eluded me. I lay on my side, facing away from him, my thoughts a chaotic mess. The sound of his steady breathing filled the room, a reminder of how close we were. I closed my eyes, willing myself to relax, but every rustle of the sheets seemed amplified in the stillness. It was as though the room itself was conspiring against me, refusing to let me forget the circumstances we were in. At some point, I must have drifted off because I woke to find the room bathed in the faint glow of early morning light. I turned to see him still asleep, his face relaxed and peaceful. For a moment, I allowed myself to simply watch him, marveling at how different he looked when his guard was down. It was a fleeting moment, one I quickly pushed aside as I got up to start the day. Breakfast was a quiet affair. We exchanged polite conversation, avoiding any mention of the night before. Yet, despite our best efforts, the tension between us remained. An unspoken presence that neither of us could ignore. As we checked out of the hotel and got into the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. Something that couldn't be undone. The drive back was uneventful, but my mind was anything but. I replayed every interaction, every glance, and every word, searching for clues. For answers to questions I couldn't even articulate. Was it just me? Or had he felt it too? The uncertainty gnawed at me, leaving me restless and on edge. Over the following weeks, I found myself thinking about that night more often than I cared to admit. It wasn't just the circumstances, it was the way he looked at me, the way his presence seemed to fill the room. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, a product of my own insecurities and overthinking. But the more I tried to suppress it, the more it consumed me. Our interactions became a careful dance, each of us tiptoeing around the unspoken tension that lingered between us. He would catch my eye during family gatherings, his gaze steady and unreadable. I avoided being alone with him, afraid of what might happen if I let my guard down. Yet, despite my best efforts, I couldn't escape the pull I felt toward him. The magnetic force that seemed to draw us together against all logic and reason. One evening, as I sat alone in my living room, my phone buzzed with a message from him. "Can we talk?" it read. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the screen, torn between curiosity and caution. After a moment's hesitation, I replied, "About what?" His response was immediate. "You know what?" I debated ignoring him, pretending I hadn't seen the message, but something compelled me to respond, to confront whatever it was that had been simmering between us. "Fine," I typed, my fingers trembling as I hit send. "Come over." When he arrived, the atmosphere was thick with tension. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he stepped inside. "We can't keep doing this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Doing what?" he replied, his tone calm but challenging. "Pretending this doesn't exist," I shot back, my frustration bubbling to the surface. He took a step closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "And what if it does?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "What if we stop pretending and just see where it goes?" His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. My breath caught as I struggled to find the right response. "This is wrong," I said finally, my voice trembling but firm. "We're family. People would never understand." "But we're not," he countered, his voice gentle but insistent. "Not really, and you know it." I shook my head, refusing to let his words take root. "It doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is doing the right thing, and this isn't it." He didn't argue, but the look in his eyes said everything he couldn't. The tension between us was palpable. A storm waiting to break. I knew then that this wasn't over, that whatever was between us would continue to haunt me, no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my routine, desperate to regain a sense of normalcy, but his presence lingered in my mind, a constant reminder of the line we'd come so close to crossing. I knew I had to make a choice, to either confront my feelings head-on or bury them deep where they could never surface again. The next time I saw him, it was at a family gathering. He was as composed as ever, his charm on full display as he interacted with everyone around him. But when our eyes met across the room, the world seemed to fade away. In that moment, it was just the two of us, locked in a silent battle of wills. As the evening wore on, I found myself drawn to him once again, unable to resist the pull that seemed to bind us together. When the opportunity presented itself, I pulled him aside, my heart racing as I spoke. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm despite the chaos inside me. "I'm listening," he replied, his tone serious but laced with something deeper. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "Whatever this is," I began, gesturing between us, "it ends here. It has to." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "If that's what you want," he said simply. But the look in his eyes told a different story, one of longing and unspoken words. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over, that the tension between us was a force too powerful to be contained, and deep down I wasn't sure if I wanted it to be.